Hi, this is Jeff Pospisil, and this is the fourth quarter Financial Foundations webinar, and we're going to be talking about charting your church's success or failure with chart of accounts. You know, one of the reasons we're talking about this is just a number of churches I've talked to have been concerned about changing up their accounting system, which is a perfect time to also take a look at your chart of accounts. And even I always think too, it's almost like spring cleaning time for accountants, in that you're wrapping up the year, and now's the time to think about what changes would I make in the coming year. So you get a chance to look at that kind of thing. First, I want to apologize. First of all, I'm Jeff Pospisil, Director of the Finance with the conference, and Sheri is my co-host. So I forgot to hit the record button when we filmed this earlier tonight. So I'm recording it now without Sheri because she had to go off and work. But so you're going to get me only, and hopefully I'll make it interesting. One of the things that makes us all right is what Sheri and I do is we often alternate, and so she'll choose the next topic, and then I'll choose the one after that. So we'll do one in her expertise, which is more on the generating income side, and I'll do the one more on the administration or the management side. And it ends up working out all right. So I'll try to remember some of Sheri's comments, but otherwise it'll be just me. So sorry. Before we go too far, I want to make sure people understand what exactly is a chart of accounts. People might not be familiar with that term, or most people, if they're listening to this, if they're a treasurer, they should know. But a chart of accounts is basically, in your accounting system, you have all those lines set up where you could record income and expense and everything else, and those lines are your chart of accounts. So those lines are your chart of accounts. So then even if you're looking at your budget, all those budget lines would be part of your chart of accounts most likely. So that's what we're specifically talking about. And for many of our churches, what they've done is they've set it up a long time ago, the chart of accounts, when they first got their accounting system going. So sometimes a decade or more ago. And then they've barely at all tweaked it, maybe just little bits every now and then they've added new accounts, but they haven't really taken a good look at it, a good close look. And to me, that's almost like, imagine that you had a paper city map. This is the 2006 map of Sioux Falls. How useful would this be? I mean, first of all, it's so dated that there's a number of streets and new additions that aren't even on here. Sheri's own house, hers would be in the southwest corner, so you wouldn't even be able to find it. And then another thing too, with a paper map, it's tough you don't even have the appropriate level of detail. Only some of the streets are named, and it's hard to find out anything else. A lot of people, they would use their phone or a GPS if they really want to find something. And so there's not the appropriate level of detail. It's probably dated or outdated and inappropriate names. So it's just not that helpful in making a decision. And so I liken that again to our outdated chart of accounts. This is a statement of activities from the church that I serve, Bismarck First United Methodist Church, from 2007. And what you would find is that there's out-of-date information or terms. There are things, programs, we've changed the name of it, or I always think about with apportionments, and our data's changed. There used to be 3 lines of apportionments, and those names changed. Now we're to 1 line for apportionment, 16%, and so a lot of that's changed. Different things have changed. So some outdated terms, outdated information right there. Some of it is not the right level of detail. Some churches will have not enough detail where you can't see, it's not broken down enough, but other ones will have too much detail where you see everything. And when you walk into that administrative council meeting and you got a 4 or 5 page treasurer's report, or statement of activities or profit and loss or whatever you want to call it, the budget report, and a lot of times that's just overwhelming for people. They'll look at it and they just won't even be able to take it all the way in. So then they focus on the handful of details that they do understand. So sometimes it's not well organized to meet the needs. We've just been adding accounts as we go, and they may not be grouped together logically. There may not be subtotals. So just sometimes that's the case. And long story short, it's difficult to use to make decisions. So if you got outdated terms or information, not the appropriate level of detail, and then it's not organized well, how do you make a good decision when you got bad information or unclear information? I wouldn't call it bad, but it's unclear information. And so really what we want to do is walk finance committees as well as the treasurer and bookkeeper through a process that you should consider on how to freshen up your chart of accounts, or if you want to do a whole redo of your chart of accounts, this is how to do it. First thing is the clean out. And I liken it to cleaning out the fridge. If you're going to clean out the fridge, you don't just, well, maybe you do. This is kind of how I do it. I stick a wet washcloth in there and I wipe some stuff down, and I hope my wife doesn't look any closer. But the proper way to do it is you take everything out of the fridge. You take everything out of the fridge and you wipe down the whole fridge. But then as you're putting stuff back in, you're looking at it closer. You're trying to say, okay, what is this? Anyhow, if it's not clear, how long have we had that? That's another question. But I mean, you're looking to not only have everything cleaned up, but you're also looking to also purge stuff that you don't need anymore, don't want anymore. And that's the same idea that goes into your chart of accounts. I would say you got to go through it line by line by line. So, and take your time, and you need to look at each line. And if you haven't done this in a while, it might take a while. If you've done it recently, it won't take as long. But you need to ask questions like, what is it? How many times have you pulled something out of the fridge? For me, we sometimes use like the Cool Whip containers or the cottage cheese containers as Tupperware, and you pull it out and you think you're getting cottage cheese, and instead it's like leftover goulash, and you're like, oh, crud. Anyway, what is it? So do you understand what that line represents? Sometimes you got to open it up and look at the transactions so you know what it means. And if this is the time where if you have an incorrect name, or maybe it's inaccurate or just outdated, this is the time to make note of that and go ahead and correct that. Make that a good descriptive name that people would understand, or at least the people that need to make decisions would understand. So the other thing is looking at when you pull stuff out of the fridge, you look at when the expiration date is. But for our chart of accounts, when was the last time it was used? I mean, if you haven't used a account, if an expense line, a budget line for 2 years, do you need it? I mean, what's the use of even putting it there? So might as well, lump it together in the miscellaneous one, but you don't need it then. And the other thing to keep note on, especially if you're with the finance committee or the treasurer, is what's missing. And don't worry so much about the income and expense side. You can talk about that a little bit, but really what I see missing most often that the finance committee and the treasurer would have input on would be on the balance sheet side or the statement of financial position. There, are all the checking accounts on there that you need? You probably don't have to have UMW on there or United Methodist Men. If they keep their own account and we don't have any authority over them, that's fine. But you should see all your regular checking accounts. You should see your investments on there or all your debts on there. Look to make sure that's a complete listing of accounts on your balance sheet. And again, this is the time. So after you go through this process, you should be able to change and correct any of the account names. And plus, if you see ones that you don't need anymore, they're old, they're outdated, you can inactivate those. And you should be able to keep all the transaction history, but a lot of times you can just hit the inactive button, or even if you keep your stuff in Excel, you can hit the hide button. So anyway, but you don't need to keep everything always forever. Same way with the fridge. You wouldn't keep everything. Some stuff you just need to inactivate to get it out of sight. The next one is Marie Kondo it. About a year ago, I read this book, and I actually read it a couple of times. It was The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, and it's by Marie Kondo. And she is just a miracle worker about tidying stuff up. She could take that pile and know logically how it should go. Apparently, she got rid of the cat. Anyway, but she just had a way of organizing stuff to make sure everything is put in a proper order where it's nice to the eye and it makes sense. And a lot of times at church, you'll see poor organization in their chart of accounts. You'll see stuff not grouped together well or out of place, and it just visually, it makes it difficult to understand it well. And so that's what I tell people is go through all your chart of accounts, especially on the expense side, anything that would be in your budget. And the first thing to do is make sure every account or line has an owner. Marie Kondo would say, every item has to have a home. I would say every account has to have an owner. Every expense has to have somebody that is responsible for it, somebody that that it's part of their job duties, or as a committee member, it's part of their duties as a committee member to watch that line item and to make sure that it's within its, make sure that they're responsible for the money that goes out of there. So that's what I mean by every account has to have an owner. The next thing is to let them own it. It's so easy for the administrative council or the treasurer or the finance committee to micromanage and say, here's your budget, do with it what you want, but don't touch it, don't change it in any way. Well, this is the time to say, okay, let's just say worship committee. Worship committee, here's your budget. Are these the lines you need to watch? And they might tweak it. Some of the terms might not be the terms that they use. It'd be the term that the bookkeeper uses or the treasurer uses. They might need additional lines or to remove a line or to group some lines together. But that way they can take some ownership of it. Randy Hedge, who is the pastor at Madison UMC, he said this to me. He said if they help create it, they'll help take responsibility for it. If they don't create it, they're not going to take responsibility for it. Something like that. But that's the idea of it. And this is a way for them to put their fingerprint on it and to make it theirs. So I like that idea. And the last thing I'd like to say, once you get everybody to own it, if you see sections where the owner has, 15, 20 different lines, I would consider breaking those into sections or categorizing those different sections if you can. One of the examples I often see is trustees, for example. Trustees might have 20, 30 lines, but they got, 5 for the parsonage and 5 for the church maintenance and 4 for the utilities, and another bunch for the cleaning and they always have a number of lines. So it's nice. Why don't you just group those together? So that way we can see how much it costs to maintain and operate the parsonage, how much it costs in total to maintain, how much all the utilities cost. So you don't have to do the math quickly on the side if you wanted to figure that out. So the next part I want to go over is the power of the roll-up. Just today, actually, I helped a friend of mine, Steve Trevs, rearrange his office because he just got his dad's roll-top desk. And what he said was, the reason I wanted a roll-top is that I can have my work all laid out there, and then when somebody comes over, I can go ahead and pull the top down and close the door on it, and then people that are visiting, they can't mess it up, but there's stuff they probably don't need to see. They just need to see the desk. They don't need to see all the details inside of it. And that's what I like about the roll top. Sometimes if we show too much detail, one, it may not be appropriate. Not everybody needs to see everything. Two, it might be too much information for some of your leaders. Two, it might be too much detail. Or 3, you might be hesitant to adding accounts that people need because you don't want to show too much detail. So there's a way, at least in most accounting softwares. So for example, in QuickBooks, they use sub-accounts. I used to use Church Management Solutions, and I think they use categories, might have been the term. I can't remember for sure, but most of them, they have some kind of cost center or sub-account or category function where you can actually group things within the accounting software. And that's what is the powerful thing. So after you did all that work, now you can go ahead and actually put that good work to use within your accounting system. So here's what this does for you. It allows you to report the appropriate level of detail. For your administrative council, you can report the summary. For your finance committee and your own reports as a treasurer or bookkeeper, you can report everything. For the worship committee, you can easily break that out. For the trustees, you usually break that out, and they could see all the details in their area of the budget. But it's so easy to just show the appropriate level of detail. I kind of said this already, but if they own it, they need own reports. They need their own reports. It's not really great English. They need their own reports. And so, again, you don't want to have them see all the details if you're sending it to the trustees or the youth or the worship committee or the children's ministry or whatever it happens to be. But you can easily break out their reports if you are using those sub-accounts or you're using those categories. So, and then the next thing is, and I think this is kind of important, it adds those subtotals in there and in those visual breaks. For many of us, even us that are really good with numbers, it just makes it easier to understand and see at a glance, here's how much we spend on the parsonage, or here's how much we spend total for worship, without me having to actually go through the math and figure it out on my own, because a lot of times I just won't do that. So, but I do like it if it's visually there. I can see a subtotal roll. What I did was, in order to put my own, take my own advice, what I did is I signed up for a 30-day trial of QuickBooks, and I set up Parkston United Methodist Church. And I kind of played around with it so that I knew what I was doing. And actually, in the notes to this, I'm going to include my template chart of accounts. So if anybody wants to use that, they can. It might be useful. Also, if anybody wants to launch a United Methodist Church in Parkston, I will give you the password and let you have it. but you only have about 20 days now left on that free trial. But I wanted to show you what it looks like. So starting off here, this is like the full detail thing. So I'm not even going to go through all the slides of this one, because this would be like your 4 pages of detail for your profit and loss or statement of activities or budget report or whatever you call it. But this would be all the detail. You can see how, for example, income is the main account, operating income, and then it has the sub accounts for the general offering and Sunday school and interest and miscellaneous. But then actually where you see it best is under the expenses. So you can see under the pastor-staff relations, that should be staff-pastor relations or staff-parish relations, I think. But anyway, you get what I mean there. You can see under that is senior pastor is the next level. And then there's another level under there that shows the pastor's salary and all the pension and the health and the continuing ed, and then the subtotal for the senior pastor. And then the same for the youth pastor, and then the same for the children's pastor and the office staff. And then you can see the same thing for the trustees and everything else. So a lot of detail. Again, useful for certain groups to see these details, but usually not for everybody to see all these details. So with these sub-accounts then, what I could do is this looks pretty much like the regular one, except for under pastor-staff relations, you just see the summary line for senior pastor, just the summary for youth pastors. So that's all of that. It goes on, children, and then you see conference giving, trustees. You see the trustees broken out: parsonage, church utilities, church maintenance, church van, property, liability insurance, all that kind of stuff. So, but you could see it's all summarized again. And then finally, these ones with I broke out the pastor-staff relations and I broke out trustees a little bit more because they're such large budgets and a lot more goes into that. But then some of these smaller budgets, office expenses, worship ministry, children's ministry, youth ministry, adult discipleship, outreach and evangelism, smaller line items are smaller budgets, so then I really don't need to show all the detail. And because mainly as long as they're within their budget, we really don't need to worry about the details as much. But this ends up being a report that fits on one page. I use the free version, so the 30-day free trial, so with QuickBooks, so I wasn't able to enter the budget in, but ideally you'd have the budget and then something that, another column that shows you if you're under or over budget. And being one page, people will be able to look at it. Maybe they'll just skip down to the bottom and see if we have a net income or loss. Maybe they'll look through the far right side and see, okay, are we over or under budget in any of our lines? That's the kind of thing that you want them to do, but they could do that on one page without flipping page after page after page. And then again, the next thing you could do is in QuickBooks, all I did is I chose the worship ministry in that same statement of or that profit and loss or statement of activities. I just chose the worship committee one is how I filtered it. And then that let me see just this section of the budget. And I could have all the details and I could have the budget there if I wanted. That's what I would want, is to show the budget as well. And then I can save it as a customized report, and then it's ready to go every month. I just have to go to that report and print it out or email it. So again, super easy. I'll post this all online. Another thing I want to show real quick is if you're interested, we keep all of our videos at dakotasumc.org, Finance and Benefits, Finance, and then it's under Video Resources. Also, if you wanted to, Stewardship Resources will actually be where we have the support materials for our webinars, but just the videos are here, so you can see those there, and any other videos we put on. But one thing I want to lift up is we started this new series called the 10-Minute Treasure, and it's a weekly video aimed at providing really practical help for church treasurers and finance committees and bookkeepers. So you click on that and you'll see that these are the questions that I normally receive in our office. We normally receive them and we respond to them regularly, or maybe they're questions too that I wish people would ask, but most often they're questions that I received. And I just like to share these with you because they're usually 6 to 10 minutes. 10-minute treasure was what I really want to aim for, is no more than 10 minutes. But if you're interested in the subject about the chart of accounts and QuickBooks, those are going to be the ones that come out very soon. These are the future episodes that are going to come out because this is the administrator one. But you can see that we're going to go QuickBooks. Is it a good idea for churches? How do you track donations? How do you handle donor-restricted funds? And then even the sub-accounts. How do you do sub-accounts in QuickBooks? And I'm going to walk through all of that. All right. I want to thank you for joining us, and feel free to check out our websites for more information, dakotasumc.org or dakotasumf.org. And again, I just appreciate you, and sorry that Sheri is not able to make the video with me because I forgot to hit the record button. But anyway, next time, by the way, join us. It'll be the second Monday in February. I don't have the date right in front of me, but second Monday in February, Sheri is going to talk about the generosity journey. And really, it's how do you move people along to growing in their generosity, and especially towards the church? How do you help them grow in generosity towards the church? So move along that journey. All right. Until next time, talk to you later.